Hi, so we are with Mike Ludlow today. And Mike, you were in the service. When did you go in?
In 1965, right after I graduated from high school.
So and you went to the academy?
Right. My dad was in the service. He retired after 20 years, just before I started high school. So I grew up in the service. Matter of fact, the longest I ever lived in one place in my life until I got to the academy was, well, the academy was the longest I'd ever been in one place in my life until I got to Temple.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was 35 years old before I'd spent 4 whole years in one place, and that was in college.
And just to be clear, we're talking about West Point, the
Right.
military academy there.
Yep.
Part of the long gray line, is
Mhm.
that the right? So, was it a foregone conclusion, or was there, what?
For me it was, because I can remember in late grade school and early middle school reading historical novels or biographies, and so I knew I always wanted to go in the Army, and then I started dreaming of the academy, and I had visions of great glory, and I got there and realized, no, that's not the way the world works, that's not the way the Army works, that's not the way people see it. But I knew from probably 12, 13 years old that I wanted to go to the academy.
So graduating in 69?
In 69, did the obligatory schools, Airborne and Ranger, and then there was a law that said you couldn't go into combat until 12 months after graduation, so I didn't get to Vietnam until middle of 70, and extended for 6 months, so I was there until February of 72.
And specifically, what did you do in the service? Were you?
I was an infantry officer. So I was rifle platoon leader in Vietnam, a company commander in Germany, a mechanized company in the Fulda Gap, and back when we really thought the Red Horde might be coming. And then my last assignment was teaching high school in Panama, and that didn't work out so well. I bailed out of the Army in 79 after 10 years, and went to Baylor, got a master's, and started working the next month after I graduated at Scott & White, and just was there until I retired.
So 10 years in the military, looking back on it, do you think that was it an experience that you would recommend for other folks? The times were different.
Times are different, and I think the times are critical. It's an entirely different military now. It's all volunteers, it's all professional. I think the caliber of the people overall is much, much higher. We had a whole bunch of people, especially in Vietnam, that didn't want to be there. Out in the bushes, the morale was good, the discipline was good, but as soon as we got to base camp, it was just terrible. It had some horror stories from Vietnam in a base camp, not out in the bushes. So, and now, since they're so professional, I'm sure being an officer or an enlisted man is just an entirely different experience than back then. I stayed in the reserves for 10 years, but because I couldn't finish the Command and General Staff College by correspondence, I got out after 20 years, but without retirement benefits. So I just spent a lot of time in uniform.
Now, for those folks who don't know, the Fulda Gap in Germany was that area that we had identified the Russians most likely.
Right, the border between East and West Germany, you've got the North German plains, the Harz Mountains on the border, and then the Fulda Gap, and then there's mountains. There's only 2 places on the border where there aren't mountains that tanks can't get through. And so if they were going to come storming across the border, It'd be the North German plains where the Brits were, or the Fulda Gap, which was probably 50 to 100 miles wide, but that's probably where they were coming. And fortunately, we thought they were 10 foot tall, and after the wall fell and we found out what was really going on, they were probably more afraid of us invading than we were of them invading.
Now, for many people, if you say Army officer, the image is exactly the kind of thing you were doing. Frontline combat infantry division. You really did it. You were in Vietnam with active shooting, and then the Cold War, preparing for a hot war. Looking back, I know it may sound silly to say compare the two, but did you find one much more stressful than the other?
You mean peacetime? You mean Actually, I did. I actually tried twice when I got back from Vietnam to get back there, but there was nothing to go back to. By the time I left Vietnam, they weren't allowing anybody to extend, kind of like the situation in the Middle East now. There aren't any assignments over there. We're pulling back. So anyway, I found more frustrations with the peacetime army than with the wartime army.
So that's the frustrations. How about the good times? What are some of the best moments that you may have had?
Oh gracious. The 2 years I was a company commander, I absolutely had a wonderful time. There were some hairy moments, or stressful moments. No danger, but worried about getting things done. But that was by far the best 2 years of my life, outside of my private life.
of your military?
Yes, my military. Yeah.
And just for those folks, company commander, how many individuals inside?
About 180 with armored personnel carriers and a bunch of trucks and my own mess team. I'm basically a own little private army. And then in the wartime scenario up there on the Fulda Gap, we would I'd give one of my platoons to somebody else, and they'd give me a tank platoon. So it was 2 infantry platoons of about 40 guys each, and a tank platoon of 5 tanks. And we had a little place up there in Fulda, where we just south of Fulda, where we were waiting for the Red Horde to come over that hillside.
Well, thankfully you never had to face that.
No, they were more afraid of us than we were of them.
Now, one question I wanted to ask everybody was, as you look back and think about your life, about how God has been there, do you see God at work in any of that? Or was there a special time when you felt especially close to God in your service time?
Oh, yeah, in combat. There are no atheists in the foxhole.
The saying really is true.
Yeah. Yep.
And I may have asked this already, would you recommend folks think about it today?
It's a really demanding life, and people have to understand what they're getting into. The Army or the military is, the analogy I use is a garden hose. The Army is from the faucet, the whole hose, and the nozzle. And the combat troops are the nozzle. And the whole rest of the Army, 80% of the Army, are the people that get the ammunition and the food and the fuel to you and tell you where to shoot, the intelligence and signal and all that. So if you go in the military, you're probably going to be part of the hose and not part of the nozzle. And it's an incredibly demanding life from a personal life standpoint. I met a young captain at Fort Hood about 2-3 years ago. We were doing a project together, and she had graduated from the academy had graduated 5 years before, She and her husband were classmates at the academy, and they became husband and wife after graduation. You're not allowed to be married there. And she mentioned that Fort Hood, after 5 years, was the first time they'd ever been stationed together. They'd had a through the mail and Zoom call, WhatsApp marriage for 5 years. I know when I was in Germany, I counted one year for tax purposes, and I was out in the field away from my family for 100 days out of 360 days, and that was peacetime. So it's really demanding on the military. The military life is really demanding. You know, the like Tommy said, they're out in the middle of the ocean for a good part of the year. So, and the same thing, not quite as long a separation, but the same thing happens in the Army. And I'm sure the Air Force has a lot of that too, where your family life is really stressed. No, the rewards are there too, but it's you need to be, you and your spouse need to be fully aware of what you're getting into.
And that is one of the things you mentioned, having to be single at the academy, but got married somewhere while you were in the service.
Yes. I got back from Vietnam, was stationed at Fort Hood, and I met my first wife. And Judy and I have been married for a little over 20 years now. But met the first wife here when I was at Fort Hood, and we went and traveled to Germany and to Panama, and then back here to Fort Hood, back to Temple.
To Temple.
Yeah.
Well, as you say, the stresses are pretty dramatic on family.
Right.
As a priest, I have seen that with many parishioners who have not always been able to successfully navigate.
Right. The Army or the military is wonderful for the training you get. You're only expected to be there for 20 years. For a young person, that seems like the rest of their life, but realistically, if you live to be 70, it's only 20 out of those 70 years. The other 50 years, there's other things that you'll be doing, and the military gives you wonderful training, wonderful travel opportunities, a sense of accomplishing things and being respected. Now, being respected. One of the things I do vividly remember was the attitude towards the military during the Vietnam War, and there's some bitterness there.
Were you subjected to a lot of?
No, but I knew it was out there. I mean, for instance, when we on the flight home, I mean, they formally said, "Hey, get out of your uniform as quick as you can when you get home." And it's in one way it's dramatically different now in that thank you for your service is something that people just say automatically. And at Fort Hood, you know, we see a lot of folks in BDU's battle dress uniform, and so they say thank you for your service. Back then, people really cared about what the military was doing. They didn't like it, and they were very vocal about it, but now we say thank you for your service, and yet in the last 20 years, I mean, we've been in endless wars. In my opinion, the one in Iraq was totally unnecessary. So there's this, back then, the people didn't like the military, the civilians didn't like the military, but they really cared about what the military was doing. And now they really care about the military, but they don't care about what they're doing to the extent that they used to. So, well,
at the risk of sounding a little bit like a cliche, I want to take the moment to say thank you for your service. I was one of those hippies, and I never confronted a member of the military coming back, but I can remember thinking, wow, how can those guys do that? They're just so wrong. So with the benefit of some years and some hindsight, maybe I was a little precipitous in my judgments back then.
Then the thing is, back then, the guys and gals in the military, they weren't the ones who decided to do that. It was the civilian voters who voted for staying in Vietnam. It was the politicians who lied to the people about why we were there and how things were going, and now the concern I have is that we have the best military in the world, without question. Have the best hammer in the world, and so for 35 years, every problem has looked like a nail. We've abused the military. We, the voters, we the people, have just not worried about what they were doing and not been active. So in some ways, I said I had some frustrations about the anti-military feelings during Vietnam, but at least people knew what was going on and cared about what was going on, and they focused their ire on the wrong subject, the poor schmucks that were serving, as opposed to the schmucks who were sending them. So,
well, maybe the lesson for today is, if you really want to thank a vet,
that's right.
Get politically involved.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
well, thanks for your time today. Thank you for your service back then. Thank you for your bravery and your lessons for us today.
thank you.